Come listen to the grimmest of Grimm tales.
I am sitting under a tree. Lol. And send. Oh, hello, there you are. Come a bit closer. Whoa, not that close. My name is Barbara the Bard, spinner of stories and teller of tales. Hey, I'm glad you popped by today because I have got a brilliant story to tell you. And it's true. I got it off the internet, so it must be true. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 daughters. He was a good and kind king who loved his 3 daughters very much indeed. However, he was also a bit mad. And as well as loving his daughters, which was perfectly normal, he also loved a tree, which was not so normal. I mean, he didn't just like it, he actually loved it. Oh, I love you, tree! Oh, I do! I love your lovely branchy wanches. Oh, and your greeny weeny leaves. Oh, come here and give us a big snog. Oh. It was said by the peasants of his kingdom that he loved this tree more than anything else in the entire world.
Here, I've heard that our king loves his tree more than anything else in this world. Oh, I know my lover. I've heard he loves it so much that if a person ever dares pick an apple from its branches, then he'll wish that person 100 fathoms under the ground. Bit over the top. Oh, I know. Well, he is mad. Some say he's out of his tree. Oh, see what he did there? Out of his tree. Oh, I'm hilarious, I am. Oh, I crack myself up. Ah.
Soon, harvest time came, and the apples on the king's beloved tree turned a beautiful shade of red. The 3 princesses longed for a taste, and the temptation to reach up and pluck a juicy red apple from the tree became unbearable. The apples looked so delicious that after many days, the youngest of the princesses could stand it no longer. She reached up and plucked a juicy red apple from the tree as she said to her sisters,
Like, I knew our father is like Bach and mad and that, but I also knew he loves us way too much to wish us underground. It is totes my belief he would only do that to people who were strangers and that. Ovs.
"Oh, young princess, how wrong you are. Unfortunately, your father truly is as bonkers as everyone says he is." No sooner had the 3 princesses taken a bite from the apple than a great hole appeared in the ground beneath them, and they were swallowed up deep under the earth where no one could hear their cries. Later that day, the king called his 3 daughters in for their tea. "Daughters! Come on inside, it's getting late. Your tea's on table. Your favourite, pizza and chips. Now hurry up. You all like it if it gets cold." But the 3 princesses were nowhere to be found. He looked everywhere for them. The village, the castle, the gardens, even the pub. But they were nowhere to be found. This troubled the old king greatly. And so he made a proclamation to his people. "Whosoever finds my daughters and brings them back safely shall have one of them as his wife. Now then, does anybody want any pizza? Be ashamed to let it go to waste." On hearing the word of the king, the young men of the kingdom got very excited. All except one, a peasant called Brian. He was quite enlightened for a peasant.
"I'm so against this whole if you rescue my daughters you can marry them thing. I mean, say I do rescue a princess, she might not want to marry me. Such an outdated concept."
But all the others, who really fancied the princesses, just ignored him and set out into the world to try and find them. Amongst these young suitors were 3 brothers. They travelled about for 8 whole days until they came across a magnificent castle. Hoping that they might find food and shelter there, they knocked upon the great door. But there was no answer. Clearly, the owners of this castle weren't particularly security conscious, because as the brothers knocked again, the great door swung wide open. They crept inside and called out,
Hello? Anybody home? I say, could we? You here?
Still, there was no answer. So the eldest brother, being a massive bossy boots, took charge.
I say, chaps, it is rather a stroke of luck that we have happened upon this castle. What say we use it as a base for our quest? Then one of us can stay here while the other two go out each day and search for the princesses.
The others agreed that it was a brilliant idea. So the following day, the eldest brother waved his two younger siblings goodbye, as he remained the first to stay in the castle. At around midday, there was a knock at the castle gate. He went to answer the door. There, standing in front of him, was a tiny man. A gnome, in fact, staring at him with beady, mischievous eyes.
Hello,
Said the gnome.
I am but a poor, starving gnome, and I was wondering if you could spare me a morsel of bread.
Well, there was plenty of food to spare in the castle, so the eldest brother cut a portion of bread and handed it to the gnome. The gnome reached up and took the bread, but then let it fall to the ground.
Oops, Butterfingers, I seem to have dropped it on the floor. What a silly sausage I am. I wonder, young man, would you be so kind as to pick it up for me? I'll get it myself, only me back's giving me terrible jip.
The brother, suspecting nothing, bent down to pick the bread up. But as he did so, the gnome kicked him so hard up the bum, ow, that he fell to the ground in surprise. The gnome then kicked him a few more times for good measure. Then ran off into the forest, cackling maniacally. Feeling rather embarrassed to have been beaten up by a gnome, the eldest brother did not mention any of this to the other two when they arrived back, but the following day set out with the youngest brother to continue the search for the princesses, this time leaving the middle brother alone in the castle. Again, at midday, there was a knock on the castle door, and the middle brother went to answer it. Again, stood at the door was the little gnome.
Hello.
Again, the gnome begged for bread. Again, he dropped it on the floor, and when the middle brother bent down to pick it up, the gnome once again kicked him repeatedly up the bum. Ow! Before again running off into the forest, cackling like a lunatic. When the other two brothers returned that evening, the eldest brother took the middle brother to one side, and they discussed how the ungrateful gnome had come to the castle and kicked them repeatedly up their bottoms. They decided not to tell the youngest brother of their misfortune, as they didn't really like him very much, and they thought it would be hilarious if, like them, he was to receive a good kicking. The following day, the two of them set off once more to look for the princesses, this time leaving the youngest brother alone in the castle.
Have a good day, brother. Hope your day's really kicking. Ha! Ha!
And so, the youngest of the brothers, whose name was Hans, in case any of you care, was left alone in the castle. Now, Hans was a simple lad, but honest and thoughtful. His older brothers used to tease him for being a bit thick, but Hans was not as daft as he looked. Sure enough, there came at midday the knock at the door. And again, there, staring up at Hans, was the gnome.
Hello.
Said the gnome for the third time.
I am but a poor, starving gnome, and I was wondering if you could spare me a morsel of bread.
Like his brothers before him, Hans cut a portion of bread and handed it to the gnome. But again, as the gnome took it, he let it fall to the ground.
Oops, Butterfingers. I wonder, would you be so kind as to pick it up for me?
Hans immediately realised that the gnome was playing him for an idiot. It was totally obvious that the gnome had dropped the bread on purpose and was planning some mischief. So, instead of bending down and picking up the bread, Hans said,
I don't think so. You dropped that bread on the floor deliberately. Now, I don't know what you're playing at, but if you want that bread as much as you say you do, you'll pick it up yourself.
On hearing this, the gnome grew really angry and started hopping up and down with rage.
Oh, pick up my bread, pick up my bread, pick up my bread right now. If you don't, then I'll kick you up the bum like I did your brothers. And then because you defied me, I'll flush your head down the toilet.
Oh, you will you? I have never met such an ungrateful, bad-tempered creature as you.
Hans then kicked the gnome so hard up his little behind that he flew across the castle garden.
Ow!
Hans kept kicking him until he stopped yelling about the bread and said,
Ow, 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 if only you'd stop kicking me, then I'll tell you where the king's 3 daughters are.
At once, Hans stopped kicking the gnome and listened to what the little man had to say. The gnome told Hans that he was in fact an earth gnome and that there were thousands more like him who lived deep beneath the earth.
Oh, there's my brother, Julian, and my auntie Hilda. Oh, yes, and then there's Uncle Tony. Oh, but we don't like to talk about him. He's a bit of a loony. Oh, yeah, and then there's Maureen. She lives next door and... Ow!
Hans gave the gnome another kick.
Sorry. Come with me and I'll show you where the princesses are.
The gnome then showed Hans a dry well just a short distance from the castle, and he explained that the princesses were held prisoner at the bottom.
The princesses are held in a room deep underground and are guarded by a many-headed dragon whose hair has to be combed and trimmed every day. To free these princesses, you must cut off the heads of this dragon. Oh, but beware your brothers, for they cannot be trusted and seek to do you great harm. Ooh.
And with that, the little gnome disappeared into thin air. Hans was left alone to ponder the gnome's words. Was the gnome to be trusted? He really wasn't sure what to do. So, when the others returned from their day's search, he decided to tell them everything that had happened. On hearing that Hans had outwitted the gnome, avoided a kicking, and found out where the king's 3 daughters were, his 2 brothers grew green with envy. In fact, they were so consumed with rage that they plotted and schemed their evil revenge.
Plot, plot, plot. Scheme, scheme, scheme.
The next morning, the 3 brothers set off to the well together. The eldest, by being the bossiest, took immediate charge of the situation.
Right then, listen up, chaps. Each one of us will take it in turns to be lowered down the well in the basket. When the person in the basket rings this bell, they must be drawn back up immediately. As I am the eldest, I shall go first.
So the eldest of the brothers was lowered into the well. He only went a short distance before he rang the bell. And his brothers drew him back up to the surface.
Well, I couldn't see a thing down there. Perhaps you'll have better luck, brother.
The eldest brother winked at his younger sibling, who winked back, understanding all too well the wicked fate they had planned for Hans. The middle brother allowed himself to be lowered down into the well, and just like his brother before him, he rang the bell after only a short distance.
Well, I couldn't see a thing either. I rather think your gnome friend has been pulling your leg, Hans. You really are thicker than thick can be. Stupidly stupid head. Poo-stain brain. Divvy pants. Thicky knickers.
All right then, lower me down into the well so that I can see for myself whether or not the gnome spoke the truth.
Now, of course, this is exactly what the brothers were hoping that Hans would say. And so they willingly helped him into the basket and lowered him down into the deep, dark, dank blackness of the well. Hans, unlike his brothers, allowed himself to be lowered all the way down to the bottom. Once there, he saw through the gloom in front of him an old wooden door. Hans climbed out of the basket, drew his sword and picked his way through the dark, smelly dampness of the cavern. Quietly, he crept up to the door and listened carefully. He could hear what sounded like a great many beasts snoring loudly. Very, very slowly and very, very quietly, Hans crept inside. Sitting in the middle of the room were the 3 princesses, and there, fast asleep, with its 18 heads resting on their laps, was an enormous dragon. The princesses were combing the dragon's hair.
So, are you going anywhere nice on your holidays this year?
Hans' heart was beating so fast, he thought it would explode. He'd only get one shot at this. He took the sword in both hands, swung it above his head, and brought the blade down on the beast's 18 necks. The heads all plopped to the floor with 18 sickening, squelchy thuds.
OMG! You have totally killed the dragon! This is amazing! Well, for real, you was totally sick. Hey, dragon loser boys, check out Hans. You was totally owned. You are so my hero. Gives a snog.
All 3 princesses ran up to Hans and hugged him and squeezed him until he couldn't breathe. The youngest princess kissed him and snogged him again and again. After much rejoicing, Hans took the princesses back to the bottom of the well, where he rang the bell and had his brothers hoist them back up to the surface of the earth. Eventually, it was Hans' turn to go up, but just as he was about to get into the basket, he remembered the words of the gnome.
But beware your brothers, for they cannot be trusted and seek to do you great harm. Ooh. How do I turn this thing off then?
And so, to be certain of his brother's intentions, instead of getting into the basket himself, he took a great stone that was lying nearby and put it in his place. He then rang the bell. Up went the basket, but when it had reached about halfway, his treacherous brothers cut the rope. And the basket, with the stone inside, came crashing back down to the bottom of the well, narrowly missing, hitting Hans on the head. Of course, the 2 brothers believed that they had killed Hans, and now they had the princesses.
Ha ha! With Vicky Pants out of the way, we can pretend that it was us who rescued the princesses, marry them, and become rich. Ha ha! A topping plan, brother. Oh. But what if the princesses tell the king that Hans rescued them and that we killed him? Good point. Right then, princesses, listen up and listen good. We rescued you, okay? And if you tell your father what really happened, then we'll chop your heads off.
And with that, they carried the princesses away with them back to the king's castle. Meanwhile, back down underground in the dark, dank, smelly well, Hans, certain that he was going to die, sat alone in misery. He was just about to give up completely when he noticed a flute hanging on the wall of the cave. He hadn't noticed it before, and having nothing better to do, he took it and played a few notes. No sooner had he done this than pop, 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 a number of little gnomes, just like the one he'd met before, appeared out of thin air.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Every time Hans played a note on the flute, then pop!
Hello?
Another gnome would be there, standing before him, until the entire cavern was filled with gnomes, all staring at him with their beady little eyes. The gnomes asked Hans what was wrong and why he looked so miserable.
Oh, let me see now. I'm a mad gnome.
Oh, Was that Barry? Did he try and kick you up the bum? Oh, he is a joker, is our Barry. Bum kicker Barry, we call him.
Will you please be quiet?
Oh, excuse me for breathing.
I have had a really bad day. I've killed a dragon by cutting off 18 heads. Yes, 18. Rescued 3 princesses, not 1 mind. Oh, no, 3. Then I was nearly murdered by my own brothers and left to rot in this stinking well. So please, do forgive me if I'm not jumping up and down with joy. Frankly, I'm over it.
The gnomes could sense that Hans was feeling a little tense,
Of course I'm chuffing tense.
and at once seized him by every hair on his head and flew him back up the well and all the way back to the castle, where they dropped him on the king's head and vanished as quickly as they had appeared.
Oh, what the blooming heck is going on? The guards, arrest that man!
Yelled the king, and immediately had Hans carted off to the dungeons. When the princesses heard that Hans had returned, they begged their father to set him free.
Why should I set him free? He is clearly an evil sorcerer of the dark arts and seeks to do you harm. Do you think I'm completely insane?
The princesses went on to explain everything.
Yeah, Hans was dead brave. He rescued us from the dragon. He like toots chopped its head off and everything. There was blood everywhere. Yeah, and his 2 brothers said that if we grassed them up and told you the truth about what really happened, then they'd chop our heads off.
And now the king knew of Hans' bravery and his brother's treachery. He at once gave the orders that Hans should be released and his brothers immediately executed without trial.
Oh, botheration.
Hans married the youngest of the 3 princesses, and with great rejoicing throughout the land, everybody lived happily ever after. As for the other 2 princesses, one of them went off to open a hair and beauty salon for misunderstood dragons, and the other married Brian the peasant.
Beezer!
And the gnome was never seen again.
Hello.
Do you like stories of daring do? Some odd, some daft, some may scare you. The one about the elf and the dragon poo. Okay, so that one isn't true. Dragons, witches...